Hi, thank you for your question. So my son is 10 years old now and he was diagnosed as autistic like literally right when he could be at 18 months old. And that's because everybody, including his doctors, thought that he had hearing loss and that he wasn't autistic. One of the biggest symptoms my son exhibited was that he was very non-responsive. You could literally be banging pans and he would not even look. He had a hearing test, he failed it. He had a second hearing test and he failed that one as well. But then the audiologist or whoever performed the test sat me down and was kind of like, I think this is probably a behavioral issue and not a hearing issue. And I was not always very accepting of my son's autism diagnosis, honestly. They sent us to a behavioral center for him to be evaluated, and I was very resistant the whole time. I remember one part of the test they gave him a doll and he threw the doll on the floor. And I'm like, well, he's a boy. Of course he threw a doll on the floor. What the hell? And I definitely was very ignorant, very belligerent. Honestly, I was scared. I knew nothing about autism, and when your kid is about to get a diagnosis, typically, from my experience, they hand you a packet from Autism Speaks, which is not great literature. I honestly at first was hoping that my son had hearing loss because to me it was like, if it's a hearing issue, then we have a direct treatment method and maybe there's a cure, maybe he can, there's a fix. I know that sounds horrible, but autism, honestly, even till this day, it can be painted in a really awful light. I was so scared for my son. I was scared of his future, my future. Well, he ended up needing to get a sedated ABR, which is a hearing test that they do when someone is sedated. If it's somebody who can't really respond as well to an in-person, awake, regular hearing test. And literally, while we were waiting to be called in for his procedure, I yelled his name down the hallway because he was on a walk with my mom down the hall, and he turned and he looked at me. And that's when I knew he was autistic, and it had nothing to do with hearing. It was at that moment, because he had never responded to his name before, but then he just did. It obviously wasn't hearing related. Obviously, once he got a diagnosis, I started, educating myself more. As a parent, I felt like the way autism was illustrated to me was just a life of complete dependence, no affection, no humor, 40 hours a week of therapies. No, thank you. We don't do ABA anymore. And listen, I obviously know, even my son, he struggles with some of those things a little bit. But, raising a kid who's autistic is nothing like they made it out to be. And my son has pretty high needs. I mean, even now, he's not fully verbal. He has a lot of medical issues related to his autism. We are always in and out of various children's hospitals, but it's still nothing like they painted it. When I thought my son might be autistic at first, I was terrified because I thought there's no cure, and I would need a cure. My son needs to be cured. But now, 10 years later, I have the most badass, intelligent, tech-savvy, hilarious kid. And I wish I saw that in a flip book before I heard all of the negative stuff that I heard.